Ki te tonga.
Kia
ora.
So welcome along, everybody. We do have Simon and Sunita joining us online, and we've got an apology from Ines for that. You haven't heard from Jake?
Jake will be 15 minutes late.
Yeah, or online?
Here.
Okay, first up we have Richmond Craft Slater Street renewal briefing. Welcome along. We've got Lisa Maria. Joining us.
Hi, I'm Lisa Maria Bigger. I'm the project manager for this project, Richmond Craft Slater Street Renewal. And I'm here with Tom, who's the designer, traffic engineer designer, as well as Claire Fletcher, who is the engagement consultation person. We'll also be talking and on this project. Yeah, so I'm just going to come to the first slide. So, sorry. The project relates to undertaking a renewal of Slater Street, which is ideally we're dealing between Warden Street and Shirley Road only, that particular section, to address the current road and footpath condition, replacing existing curb and dish channel, and providing improvement street amenity. The budget for this particular project is 2 million, and all this funding is coming from the Richmond Craft program. Sorry, I'll just go on to the purpose. I just meant to mention purpose first. So, this project, we're here to present to the board the Slater Street renewal for Slater Street, and to discuss the consultation approach, and seek the board's feedback prior to consultation, as well as give an update of the Richmond Craft program, which we'll be doing towards the end. The original scope did include Slater Street and Bird Street intersection. However, because of the insufficient budget that was mentioned at the briefing on the 28th to the board agreed to going ahead just with the Warden Street and Shirley Road section only.
Can I ask a question just as a memory bolster?
Yeah.
No recollection of that at all, actually, but was there any discussion or consideration of reducing the specifications and design, etc., to then be able to do more but make it less costly for the small bit?
It was discussed then.
Yeah.
At that particular board briefing, we discussed the Richmond Craft program as a whole, and we proposed going with this because this is, we just get more value out of doing the section, and the budget only allows for this.
Yeah, but my question is, the budget may only allow for this, but if you looked at doing less, like some of the narrowing and all the other stuff that's going on in that, if that changed, could you have done a larger piece as far as the renewal goes and been less fluffy?
So one of the implications of the upper section is it's got some quite big drainage considerations, and particularly a lot of coulter. So that's going to have quite a lot of cost implications. Right, okay. That's probably over our budget. So that was part of one of the drivers to go up the section. In terms of condition, maybe better off getting the section done, and what you're seeing on the screens really is for lack of better terms, it is quite bare bones. A lot of what I'll get into later on, a lot of the cost implications are associated with where we've got utilities and our friend culture on the road and those sort of things that we need to think about and factor in.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Oh, Vic's got a question.
I'm just going to pick it up now because you mentioned the coal tar. Can you give us some confidence around the budget allocation that we've got for this, given the complications and budget overruns we've had with a number of our works involving accounted for coal tar?
So you can correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa. So that was part of the thinking around reducing the scope. So having confidence in the overall budget we've got for the prep program left over, as that should be sufficient to do this. And then if we've got anything left over, we can look at the other, how we reallocate that. And so that's then hopefully going to build in that sufficient contingency to manage the coal tar issues and those sort of things.
Okay.
What is that contingency you put in for the coal tar? I think what Vic's asking is, how can we be assured that you've put enough aside there for the coal tar issue? Because every other street that's had coal tar is blown out by over $1 million. So I'm sure you have, but
Oh yeah, so I think there's a couple of things we've done is in terms of when we've been developing our internal cost estimates, we've been increased the assumption around the amount of material you've got to mill off the top of the road. So with coal tar, it's normally the first portion that you've got to take out. It's the first portion of the road that has the coal tar in it. So we've increased that, but then we've also increased the overall project contingency to manage that as well. So there's a little bit of two ways of being able to manage that.
So isn't the reality also that craft money is a limited bucket? So if they pull it from somewhere, it's got to come from somewhere else within the craft budget rather than going to look for new money.
So I think when I am referring to craft, I'm referring to the Richmond craft.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So the overall in the craft budget, this is why we reduced the scope to
Sure.
accommodate whatever funds there are available.
Yep.
So in the event of something like this happening, like the coal tar, there's a bit of budget to cover for that before we include the other bits and pieces like
Sure.
intersection that we have.
Yep. So cut the cloth.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Emma.
Okay. So with that slide, sorry. Yep, so I'll just hop on to the next slide, which is at this point, I will hand over to Tom, who will discuss the scheme design and other design considerations that need to be taken into account with this project.
Thank you, Lisa. So part of the thinking around this project is undertaking a street renewal that is going to be consistent with what we've got in the surrounding streets and surrounding community. And so the key aspects of that are trying to get a 9-metre carriageway at our narrowings that's going down to 6 metres, and that's based on feedback we've had from likes of yourself and the community that it's to try and reduce through speeds. And so that's also driven the thinking of having those narrowings or those speed reductions in the centre of sort of mid-block rather than at the ends, because at the ends you've got your stop signs or whatever to control those sort of speeds.
Have we got information on that? Is that in the hub somewhere, the speeds and, I mean, you will have assessed.
Yeah, so that as part of, well, there's a couple of things happening. It's part of the bigger speed reduction that's been happening. The whole area has been reduced to 30, but as part of the project, there's also concern around antisocial behaviour and trying to think about how we're going to reinforce that posted speed limit.
So antisocial behaviour and what?
There was, I think, there's reports of burnouts and just excessive speed along particularly the section of Slater Street.
just what you get on the big wide streets.
Yeah.
Is that somewhere in the hub or something?
Oh, it's been discussed all the way through the craft.
Yeah, is it somewhere in the hub that I can have a look at, Mark, do you know?
not recalling off the top of my head, where that would come back to, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be a nuisance, but could someone find out where that might be, just so we can have a look at it? Because I don't recall actually seeing the breakdown on that. That would be awesome. Thank you. Thanks.
You mean that'd be going right back to the very beginning with why the street was chosen?
No, I know that the quality of the street, I mean, think that the quality of the street's always been appalling, which is
Yeah.
why that renewal was important. But I just can't recall any stats on car numbers, speeds, unsocial
behaviour.
behaviour. Yeah. So it'd be helpful to see that, please. Thank you.
So that's one aspect. Another challenge we've had with this street is around where utilities are, and so that's why I've included these two bottom quite engineering looking cross sections. So basically, any of those lines that are drawing down are showing where those utilities are under the road, and so that's impacted on the requirements have to remove the existing trees, and that's basically. Some of them were over the water main and everything else. We had a tree assessment undertaken that was showing those trees were quite poor quality. So as part of this is, unfortunately, we have to remove them. It's looking at how we can replace them, but also include more trees as well. It's also quite heavily driven our selection of tree species. So the smaller ones you can see here underneath the power lines, they've been chosen because they're quite a small tree, so they're not going to impact with overhead lines. We've gone through quite a process at council to identify the preferred species there. In other locations, we're trying to put in some more cherry trees where there's not that impact with power lines. These are actually predominantly on where we're narrowing the streets, because that's putting them outside of the envelope around the power lines. So that's quite an important thing to think about is there has been quite a lot of thought into how we're protecting those utilities, but also being able to bring in more trees. And so that's also had some influence on where we put the narrowings, based on where we can put more trees, but also thinking about how we're impacting how people are going to get in and out of their houses and parking on the street.
Do you ever discuss undergrounding of Orion's power lines or anything when you look at something of this degree as a renewal?
It depends on the budget and also depends on the complexity of the project. And I suppose it would be something like Ryan's willingness to come to the party as well.
Has it been discussed as a part of this at all? Was it raised with Orion or?
Not specifically with this one.
Okay.
Yep, so just reiterating, so curb to curb width is supposed to be 9 metres, that's consistent with cover streets we've got there. Where we're proposing narrowings, that will be down to 6 metres. Amenity and landscaping, so new street trees, we were doing landscaping and planting, that will be, the species will be consistent with what's within the local community. And then once again, that our design has been heavily influenced by where utilities are located, and it's also had an influence on our selection of tree species as well. I suppose a little bit more about trees. So we have to take out 21 trees because of their impact on utilities and their health. We're proposing to put 31 trees on this section of Slater Street, based on and so that will be 26 of the smaller ones which are underneath the power lines, and then 5 cherry trees where there's not in conflict over the lines.
Are they like flowering cherries?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so based on council's tree policy, that means we're not unfortunately able to fit all the 2-to-1 requirement on Slater Street. And that's mainly because when the scope was reduced, it means we didn't have that other section of Slater Street, but had no trees that we could put them in. So what we're thinking of doing is, council has, as part of their urban forest policy, allows for infill planting. And so I was thinking about maybe having some infill planting on surrounding streets like Warden Street to try and make up that balance.
Okay.
'Once again, parking. So 1 we've had to think about where we can put those narrowings to minimise that impact on parking. And when you're thinking of putting those narrowings, it's not only on street parking, it's making sure you're maintaining good visibility from driveways. Sometimes, if you don't do that thinking, you're going to have a lot of yellow lines on the road to maintain that visibility. So that's been quite a key driver we were putting them.
Informal parking location, as opposed to a parking location.
Okay, so when I think of a formal parking location, you got your white lines like outside, whereas informal is what you would see on the street, where you're not really bounded into a specific location.
It's like when people park in a cycleway, an informal parking spot.
So no taxis are parking.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
All right, okay, so since the last briefing with the board, which was in March, we don't have an estimate update, and don't expect to have changed, and we don't expect it to have changed much, and we'll be getting another estimate after consultation, the costings. Okay. At this point, I will hand you over to Claire for the consultation approach.
Good afternoon.
Just spin that round, please, Simon,
This one?
online.
Can you hear me online? Okay.
We'll take that as a yes.
all good.
Thank you. So as it states on the slide there, the purpose of the engagement is to inform the local residents of the draft plan and understand if there's anything else that we may need to know about the street and its use prior to confirming and getting a decision from the board. There's approximately, there are 22 homes or apartment style units in the area affected. So when looking at the significance level of criteria level for engagement, this is a lower end scale project.
22 out of how many?
22 houses on this section of the road.
Right, on the section.
On the section of this road, so that would be directly impacted by the proposal. And then there are Shirley Primary School students, a very small number from my own observations, that are being either walking through Slater Street in this section to get to school in the morning and leaving in the afternoon, or being dropped off either just after the Shirley Road entranceway or in the reserve car parking itself. But those numbers are, when I observed it, 15. So we will be in contact, we already have been in contact with Shirley Primary School, who have offered to share the information through their channels with the smaller number of parents that may be affected. We'll use a combination of letterbox drops to all of those households and units and direct mail to absentee owners of the properties that would be impacted by the proposed narrowing, of which there are, I think, 3 that are absentee owners. We'll also use email to inform the Richmond Residents Association, the St Albans Residents Association, Emergency Services and Orion of the proposal, and gather their feedback or understand if they'd like to provide feedback in the consultation period. We'll also meet with any residents or groups on request for this project. The consultation will open on Monday and be closing on Monday, the 29th of September. So it's about 4 weeks, or it is 4 weeks.
Jake's got a question for me.
Emergency services, do they generally submit on a project that's, kind of as small as this? And if they do they have a standard feedback that they offer, or is it quite varied?
Great question, Jake. And unfortunately, it's not something I can answer. I'm very new to the team. I've been at with the team for about 2 months, coming from Environment Canterbury. So my understanding of the level of participation that the emergency services have on a range of projects is limited, but I can find out for you.
Yeah, just be keen to know if there's a stock standard thing. I suspect it might be.
Yeah.
Pauline?
Yes, thank you. Trees.
Yes.
So how are we going to deliver the message about the tree loss?
So we're going to be completely transparent about it, and they or what I forgot to mention is we will have a consultation page on Let's Talk, Korero Mai,
Yeah.
which is where we'll be gathering the feedback through. On that site, we're very transparent about the fact that we will have to remove the trees in order to renew the footpath, but also because they're in poor health at the moment as well, and the utilities underneath. But we'll also be sharing that we will be replacing them with more trees.
Well, I think you've got to maybe outline that the council has a policy of putting 2 for 1. Not all of them will be insulated. It's going to be
Yes.
31 and the balance will be in the surrounding street. But my question's more like, it's the people that don't get the flyer in the letterbox, or they chuck it out, or it's, they don't know. Are you going to be door knocking at all, or?
We were not intending to door knock door to door for this particular project, but leave it in letterboxes. However, what I would say is if I've not heard a good amount of feedback within the first 2 weeks, then we would consider doing that.
It's only 22 houses, isn't it? Because I mean, all you need is 2 people, even 1 person that gets a shock when the chainsaw comes out, and then it's front page. I didn't know. There's always someone that doesn't know. How can we actually make sure that everybody knows? And that's what I'm flagging.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. That's reassuring to know that you'll keep an eye on the feedback coming.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Keep
definitely.
it up next week.
Oh, one more quick one from me, if I could. Is the space allowed for tree planting? We've got an issue at a nearby street of the footpath being quite undulating. Is something similar an issue here, or is there no problem?
So we've had quite a lot of consideration around where trees are going to protect utilities, but also footpaths. That's why, as part of our scheme, we're having a wider back room, and that's where the majority of the trees are going to go, and so that's going to give them sufficient space to not impact on the footpath and that. So we've been quite careful around where we're proposing to put those trees.
So a follow up to that then. So good to hear that that isn't an issue on the street. Have you done that as a consequence of the loadings on Nichols Street, or is it just that you have options here you didn't have there?
So it's a combination of, I suppose, lessons learned from other projects. It's also underground, we're quite constrained. So in the front room, ironically, plant that as a water main. Ironically, the existing trees are on top of that. And so that's one of the reasons that some of the asset managers and council will be quite keen to see them go. And so that's really the influence, having a bigger back room where you can plant the trees free from utilities, free from impacting on the footpath. Then you've got the problem of that's also where the overhead lines are, and so that's informed the selection of tree species to be small enough that you're not going to impact on your line maintenance, because that's been a problem, as you can see on Slater Street at the moment. It's a lot of the trees had quite a lot of informal pruning, which means basically the top's been whacked off, and that's unfortunately caused them to not be too great.
Right.
That'll all be in the.
It is.
Just looking at what we've been dealing with overhead lines and the river strips and St Albans and the pruning of trees and things there. And I know we're way down the path of this one now. I'm really interested in why there isn't a standard discussion or conversation with Orion about this as far as future proofing goes. I'm just, I mean, if you're doing work that is essentially 80% of the work required to underground wiring, and you're doing it now, why would you not be having a conversation with the energy provider or the lines people about putting those lines underground, so that in another 5-6 years, if that happens, you're not digging up the road again to do it again?
But then you wouldn't be able to have trees, would you? There might be too much infrastructure.
So
Well, you're having to remove the trees anyway. That's why this is an absolute gift, and actually looking at
Well, let's let
proofing.
Tom answer the question.
So although you're correct in that it's opportune time to do it because you're doing a street renewal, there's a significant cost in the infrastructure of pulling out the power poles and the cabling that's needed to put the lines on the ground. Council really can't afford to do that, particularly in this climate.
No, I understand that, but wouldn't it be something you would do in partnership with Orion? I mean, the thing is, you're not. I mean, what I'm not hearing is that there's not even a conversation going on. There's not even a discussion. When you say significant costs, I have no idea whether that's $100,000 or $2 million.
There would be no
I can answer that.
So,
There has been a discussion. Sorry to butt in.
Briefings.
And we did hear from council staff when we had that site visit on Mercy Street, that Orion doesn't, that council there has to pay for it. Orion don't cover the cost of the underground.
Well, I'm still waiting for a briefing on that so that we
Yeah,
can.
and that, we're working on that,
Yeah,
Ellie.
yeah.
But we did ask that question at
Yeah.
that site visit.
Yeah.
And we're told that council has to pay for it.
Okay, I'm not going to have an argument with you here. They said Orion won't pay for it. What I'm saying is they need to be able to pay for it. It's their infrastructure, right? But I'm just interested why we're not having a conversation with them about doing that. It seems this is a good opportunity to do it. You just don't do it. We just
So I
don't.
think Kelly can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's, to be able to do that, you'd need to be more money increased to each project within the long-term plans and within the overall budget. And so really, when we're designing to a budget and to a scope, and
Okay, it's just,
so it's
yeah.
more of a, I suppose it's more of a programming thing and thinking of that bigger role.
So I will just jump in there, sorry.
Kelly, I might just get, even if you want
Sorry?
to come up there, just so the people online can short you.
There's one here, just.
Well, there's one just here.
Yeah.
Oh, there is.
That one's not behind, is it?
In general, we can certainly provide a lot more, a more succinct answer in general about how council treats the undergrounding. In general, yes, it is council that has to pay for the undergrounding. And for a local road like Slater Street, it's not something that Orion would ever be interested in funding because it doesn't benefit them in any way. If it was, say, a state highway where you had people travelling at higher speeds, excuse me, or a higher volume of vehicles, then that's something that we would be more likely to approach them on. But in my experience, the answer is always no.
Do you have any idea of the sort of cost?
Years ago, it used to be about $1 million a kilometre, but I haven't had that. I don't know if that's still correct or not. So that's probably a good 5 or 6 years ago that figure was being bandied around. So I'm sorry, I don't have an up-to-date figure on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, but we can certainly provide more information about how we, in general, work with undergrounding, if that would be beneficial to the board.
Can you just confirm for me before we move off this? They own that infrastructure?
I believe so. Yes, it's Orion's infrastructure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and this would certainly be, I'm assuming at the moment, the driver for undergrounding is coming from work that council is doing. So therefore, the responsibility of paying for that sits with us.
Yep.
It's not something that they are proposing because it needs to be upgraded.
It will cost them. I think it's a
right.
conversation that's got to be had.
Yeah.
You just got to look at the streets around St Albans and the problems we're having there. So.
And look, years ago, we used to propose with communities about going into a cost share for undergrounding. So council will pay, say, 50%, and if the residents can then come up with 50% as well. As far as I'm aware, that hasn't been done for a good 10 or 12 years, and actually then trying to organise with, who in the street is the person that's going to be going around and door knocking and collecting all that money. Was quite messy. So it's not something that we have invested time in.
The last thing I want to say on this is I remember Roger Sutton saying just after the earthquakes that one of the real advantages of the investment that Orion had made, not only in the substations but in the undergrounding, meant that they managed to get power back on a lot more quickly and there was less damage because things were underground and poles didn't fall over.
Yeah.
So what's confusing me is Orion seems to have some ownership of this whole situation and resilience of their power delivery, and yet they're going nothing to do with us when we talk about that resilience and undergrounding. So that's why I find it so fascinating. It would be great to have some sort of briefing on that. Who owns what, who's responsible for what, and is there some way that we can long-term look at a strategy where we're actually working together so that we can protect the resilience of our network?
So in the short term, we can certainly provide you with some information in general about how
That would be really
and then
helpful.
I'll leave the rest with.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Jack, did you have something else?
Oh, just at this time, because initially when you raised it, I was thinking, well, any extra cost for Orion is dividend back to us, so it's no matter what costs us. But then I thought, well, Orion is actually a monopoly with guaranteed price path. So if it was their cost, they may be able to pass that on via the consumer, which
which is us.
which still impacts people, but,
There's a way to, there's a way to, or it'd just be nice to have the conversation.
yeah, I agree. That brief is.
It's not sure that undergrounding is resilient, as you say.
No, it's just something
I'm
Roger
sure
said.
Roger said to me after the quakes that actually certain areas that were undergrounded actually, and all the liquefaction actually totally destroyed the pipes.
It's more resilient above ground, it's more flexibility. In fault condition, fighting is much easier. Underground is less resilient because it doesn't stretch.
Yes,
That's the reason.
yes, so it's not a be all and end all. It might be okay in some areas, but not advisable.
So reducing.
Anyway, we need to wind up because we've gone over time for that one. Was that all you guys had for us?
Just interesting. Okay, exactly.
Oh, no, sorry, carry on then.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll just move on to, thanks, Claire. So these are just basically high level timeframes, project timeframes, and next steps moving forward on the project. We will have a better idea of when construction starts after consultation, and pricing estimates from the contractor towards the end of the year are submitted.
Has it been tendered yet? Has the job been, it won't have, has, because you haven't costed it? No, because you haven't costed it, yeah, okay.
Actually, then, any other further?
So how long is it going to take? Was it just, you say April?
From April, yeah.
How long will it take, do you know? For sure?
So, yeah, this is an approximate time, keep this in mind. So, construction, yeah, around about then.
Sorry, how long?
How long would the actual construction take?
Oh, we're looking at about 5 months.
Oh, really?
September.
And that will be on the, that'll be on the document too, will it be? The length of time it's going to take? But
No, because I would assume it will depend on the final design as to how long it takes and who gets the tender.
be good to have give them an idea.
I agree, absolutely you should.
Or just something like that, maybe?
Yeah, 4 to 6 months covers it.
I kind of thought it would be a month, but.
Yeah, I thought it'd be a month.
It'll be longer than a month, and not all of that time will necessarily be roads on the street. So you'll do your construction, you do your purchasing channel and that, you'll do a seal, and then you might need to come back and tidy it up. So that construction timeframe.
Yeah.
That's for the overall package of construction, from when they start to when it gets handed over to council and they tidy it up.
So give it a stop-start.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's also some planting afterwards and all that.
You may even want to put both dates in. If there's an intensive period, 4 weeks, it's going to look like a bomb's hit it. Actually, there'll be work happening over 5 to 6 months, just so people don't think it's all as bad as in the intense period.
Yeah.
Yeah, John, this last one, finish up.
Okay, I'll just go back to trees for a moment. Like really reiterating from what Pauline was talking about earlier, I think it's really important to upfront load in the communications that this tree program is happening, because I think when people understand it and the conversation happens early and why we're doing this and the rationale for it is quite sound. Currently, those trees, they do look quite good en masse. It's a lovely looking group of trees with their leaves on at the moment. And they would be very noticeable if someone drove home from work in the second week of April and they're gone. Yeah. So leading to my question, it is the new trees that are planted, that species, how long will it take for the sort of the space to fill with biomass again?
So
Oh, yeah, are they going to be fairly mature trees? That's a good point.
I don't know that off the top of my head. One of the things I do know is because we've got such a limited amount of space in that corridor, in that road, because of utilities and everything else, the tree species that has been selected is a smaller tree.
Yep.
So it's not going to have probably the same amount of mass as other ones do. I know, I'll try and find out.
There are quite detailed emails between the arborist and things. I think, I might be wrong, but I think they talk about.
I talk about 6 metre height and that sort of thing. I don't recall seeing how long it would take for them to,
Oh, I see.
how high they are when they go in, and whether it's years or it does. There's a discussion about a breed that starts with L.
And sounds Latin or something.
Yeah. So it'll be a couple of, years rather than months.
Yeah, so I think
Look like
maturity might be 4 to 5 years. But then we're looking at selecting obviously a species that has a bit of growth and a bit of volume to it when it goes in.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah, good thing.
Yeah, imagine getting your street done up outside your house.
It'll look nice. Be in.
Lovely.
Looking forward.
Thank you very much for that update.
Okay, can I?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, we'll just go, I just do
An update on the rest.
update of the Richmond Craft program. Okay, so I just thought I'll use this as an opportunity. So the speed restriction, as you know from the last brief, has been delivered last year, September, and is operational at the moment. The neighbourhood greenway construction is to start once Nicol Street and Dudley Street are complete, which is early 5. Right, with regards to the intersections, the 2 Averill Street intersections, which is Petrie and Averill, and Stapletons Road and Averill, are complete. Those are just some pictures showing what they look like. And most recent, we've just had some landscaping completed in May this year, 2024. And lastly, we just need to confirm costs for Slater Street to know whether there's any funding left in the Richmond Craft program to deliver further intersection upgrades.
Jake, you had a quick question?
Yeah, it's always quick. The government's reversal of blanket speed limit changes, is the Richmond or any other craft projects tied up into that? Are they exempted in some way?
Well, this has the speed restrictions that happened in Richmond had gone through already and implemented before.
But the reversal covers everything from January 2020.
Just 1 second.
2021.
Sorry. As far as I'm aware, there hasn't been a council decision made yet on all the speed restrictions that are already operational. It's a work in progress.
Yeah, okay, cool. So they're in place, but
And just because the Richmond or any of the other craft speed restrictions have been paid for by the government, as far as I'm aware, that doesn't make them exempt. We certainly haven't heard that that is the case. From the limited information that's already been out, I think the rule, whatever they decide, will be irrelevant for all speed restrictions that have been put in the term that the government have been speaking about.
cool. Thank you. Sure.
Great. Thank you very much for that update. We'll look forward to seeing that consultation. Wait. Next up, we have Te Kaha Streets surround.
Oh, good. Thank you for having us, and hopefully this isn't a bit too repetition of what we heard last Wednesday at the council meeting. So apologies to the councillors here. So I'm Jenny Rankin. I'm the project manager overseeing the transport portion of these works. My counterpart Ross Julian from the water team couldn't make it today, so I'm standing in for both of us. And I've got with me today Dan Lucas, who is subcontracted to Isaacs to deliver the package of works for the construction of this surrounding street project. So back in July, Isaacs were awarded with the full package of works for the water and transport elements of the surrounding street package. But what we did was we separately portioned the water supply and sewer upgrade work, and we the transport work on a pause as a separate portion until the NZTA decision around funding was determined. But what happened was last week we went to council and sought to get a portion of that transport work going ahead of that NZTA decision, just based on a lot of factors which I'll get to in a minute. So since July, August, Isaacs have started on that 3 water work, and so that's well underway now. Many hundreds of meters of pipe have been installed to improve and upgrade that water infrastructure. So as you can see, this is when they first started. This was around just the water upgrades. So on site was just really around getting those services renewed. And then now what we're looking at as of last Wednesday is all those areas in red. So the water upgrades will carry on, but now what will come into play is the transport elements on those red streets will start happening in parallel to those water upgrades. So what this means is that we can maximise on our construction efficiency. So we can do it in parallel to that waterworks. We can minimise our disruption to our stakeholders and those neighbouring businesses and properties. We can achieve construction ahead of the opening of the stadium, and we can address some of the tie-in water-related issues that we had concerns around with the level changes. So the stadium is built to a certain height. We've got to meet that height with the new footpaths. And then in association with those new footpath heights, we don't want to create any worsening flood-related stormwater issues in the area. So that's really where the critical nature of us achieving some of that transport work, regardless of the NZTA decision, now is kind of why we kind of proceeded with that. So in terms of a time frame, last week we talked to the council about what that time frame looked like. So we're expecting a decision from NZTA on our transport funding around October. We will then come back to council and notify them about that funding and what it might look like, and come back with options to them, whether we proceed with the remaining portions. That remaining portion is the further extents. So that's out to Fitzgerald Avenue and down to Morehouse Avenue. So that's kind of the further extents. We call that separable portion 3. So we have a no-go decision to make around December on whether we proceed with those, or if we proceed with them by that date, then we will achieve everything we need to achieve by the opening of the arena. If we don't make a decision by December, we look at becoming critical in terms of time frame for having everything done in time for the opening of the arena. So I'm just going to pass over to Dan. He's going to talk to you about how we're managing the construction sequencing, how we're managing our stakeholders, and we'll just talk you through that.
Just before you start, sorry, Dan, we might go questions for Victoria and James.
Thank you. The Litchfield Street upgrades, the amenity for people eating and drinking, that is in separable portion 3.
Separable portion 3. So
you know, then there's only $5 million of works in portion 3. Do you know what the revenue assumptions are with that $5 million?
I will need to talk to that in a PX environment because it's commercially
Isn't you're talking about just the Litchfield Street bit?
Why? I'm just wondering what the quantum of activity is involved, what the risk is if we have made a decision to go forward.
I believe you would have, as a councillor, received a PX appendix to that report.
I don't think it had that figure.
It had, so certainly you can put in a request.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I take your point.
Okay.
Cool, thank you then.
But the resolution did agree in principle, providing we determine the budget later on.
Well then that leads me to my third, sorry, Victoria, question. Do you know how much, and again, you probably can't answer in this environment, how much extra cost has been lumbered onto the project as a consequence of splitting in 3?
I can't answer that in a non-PX environment.
Okay.
Yeah.
You make a note of the 2 questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
My question is whether this piece of work will be included in the round when we have all our transport discussions, or is it going to be a conversation in isolation?
Sorry, could you repeat that in terms of?
We're expecting to be coming together as a council after the NZTA decision to look at all our transport projects as a whole so that we can endeavour to do some prioritisation and trading off, because we need to understand that if we're putting more money here, then it's going to have to come off something else. So will this remaining parts here be part of that conversation in the round at that same time?
Absolutely. So what they,
Only pushing through.
Yeah.
Yes, so,
Okay.
so basically as part of that discussion that you all have as a council, there will be options made around, okay, well, if this happens, what would we offset this?
Mm.
So what would the consequences be of accepting to proceed with SP3 on this basis?
So therefore, on that timing, the go, no go decision, I thought we were meeting in like September or October to be able to do that.
I think so.
So we could be knowing well in advance of that December.
So you'll know about,
That's the latest they can have.
Oh.
yeah, so effectively what the Secretariat and NZTA will come out with something in September around the formalisation of their GPS. But what happens is we have a business case that's lodged with NZTA, which has now effectively been put on a shelf, and they're just going to pull it off after September, and then they will take it to a formal like boardroom where they sit around and discuss it and decide whether they're going to fund it or not on that.
Okay, well, that's
after the September date.
It's after the September date, and possibly after we've had our conversations around what we are and aren't going to fund in our transport budget.
I thought we can only have those conversations once.
Once we get there, okay.
Off the clarity. If there's pushback on that date, there's pushback on that date.
Okay. And then, so the December 24 is the latest date that we can make the go, no go in order to meet the completion of construction November 24.
So we're trying without significant risk and financial consequence. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Right, Dan, over to you.
So I guess how we structure the project, we've got an east side and a west side of the stadium, so that defined by the yellow and blue there. What we do is create a project team per side. And there's a number of benefits with that, but essentially we can create a little bit of competition between the two teams. We can have a bit of a race. And across the bottom, things like stakeholder liaison, myself as project manager, and that's just to keep the consistency across both zones to make sure that although they're going for it and having a race, we have the same delivery on both sides.
Okay.
So the scope of work, this is the entire package of work. So this is SP 1, 2 and 3. So you can see there over 2 kilometres of pipe to put in, and then additional stormwater, which actually falls under the transport package. 13 sets of signals, pavements, asphalt, pavers, footpaths. So to date, we've been installing pipe for 2 weeks as of Monday just gone, and that was the update that went out last Friday. So a little over 900 metres, or just under 900 metres, sorry, installed in those 2 weeks. So yeah, this is particularly complex. So coming into the central city has a number of complexities with it. These are some photos of the underground that we're dealing with. So when we're trying to put new pipes in, they're normally larger size pipes because naturally we're trying to take more capacity. And essentially we're trying to weave the pipes through those existing services you can see in the ground there. Down the bottom is a sort of a 3D image of obviously when we're upgrading wastewater, we're still dealing with live wastewater flowing through those pipes while we're replacing them. So obviously a number of environmental considerations, how we're catching that sewage, pumping it past us while we're replacing that section of pipe. And a lot of the pipe work that we're actually connecting into dates back to pre-1900. So we have an archaeologist on site in specific high-risk areas. The bottom right picture there is actually a picture of some bluestone that we found buried in Litchfield Street, which the archaeologist was particularly interested in, but we haven't had much of an update on where it came from or what it was. But with all of that, probably by far and away, the most complex thing working in Central City is the number of stakeholders and the needs of all of them that we're trying to balance. So we've got a huge amount of buses and naturally the road users that we're dealing with. A tram who's particularly precious of their new route up High Street and out Poplar, and aren't that keen to stop that at any point. Pedestrians, we've got a large number of residents in there now. So traditionally we've been able to work outside of normal hours a lot more without impacting too many people from a noise point of view. And then naturally the balance of daytime operating businesses versus nighttime, and of course interfacing with the stadium build. So traffic management is always the hot one. So in all honesty, from now until the completion of project, you're generally going to see each of the roads that we're working on down to a single lane. So Barbados, Madras, Litchfield and Chewham. They'll finish at separate times and open back up, but what we're warning people is expect a single lane in those streets surrounding the stadium. So here's some images of, this is what you're starting to see out there now. These images take into account 3 different pipe lengths there. So installing water main, installing sewer, and installing stormwater. So when we talk about efficient delivery, that's about picking everything at their certain depths and alignments and making the most out of that space that's available to us. So that is the typical layout that you're going to see on Madras and Barbados Street and Litchfield Street. So the unique thing about Litchfield is, as I mentioned, the tram are now using their loop. Each pipeline that we take up Litchfield, we actually need to tunnel underneath the tram line and get the tram operational during that time. So they will stop occasionally, but cruise ship season is coming. And they've made it pretty clear that they will not be stopping while the cruise ships are in. So we've got some windows that we can work between. But yeah, it makes it pretty complex down Litchfield Street there.
Do you use like a worm or something, get the pipes and?
Sort of, we'll put diggers on both sides and tunnel under and then pipes through. So the water's a lot easier, that's under pressure. The grade of it doesn't actually matter, but the wastewater is on grade. So we have to actually lay it, it's about 0.7% full. So the guys sort of need to stand on either side of that tunnel and line it up perfectly. So while the tram's breathing down on us saying we want to get past. So yeah, it's I guess this is the stuff, what we warn people is, particularly while we're doing the underground work, they get no visual progress. So all they get is a whole lot of disruption, us digging a hole. The only progress they get is the diggers move down the road a little bit as we go. So it is pretty hard to keep people's chin up while we're doing this stuff, because they don't really feel like they're getting any benefit from it.
They drive past and there's 3 people standing there, actually not actually doing anything right.
So yeah, how does it work? This is when we talk about efficiency, and I guess this is where we've been working with Jenny and the council team. It's just about those timeframes of, right, as the sewer has gone past, we now want to start water quickly, and the water's gone past and we now want to start stormwater quickly. So that image just demonstrates how if we can get that timing right, we can have the different teams lined up ready to go on the next activity and the next activity and the next activity, and that's how we reduce that impact as much as possible. And more pictures of how it works. Interesting thing about the water main is a lot of the ground around the stadium is considered contaminated. So the water main the pipes we're lifting in there are ductile iron. So each of those pipes are about 300 kilos. So again, a little bit different to the normal pipe work that you see out in the rest of urban Christchurch. I'll skip through these because we've overdone the pictures. A lot more resilient, I guess, more safe in terms of hygiene, in terms of that contamination and so on, and they will last longer. So obviously the question always comes up, why do we do it all at once? I was thinking about how best to demonstrate this, but the 3 long bars there illustrate the time it's going to take to put the pipes into Madras, Barbados and Litchfield. If we can take the opportunity to do them all at once, you can see the entire project is delivered, well, the entire pipe work is delivered between August and December. If we waited and did one street at a time, each of those bars push out by those 4 months. Rather than being a 4-month duration, it becomes a 12-month duration. So I talked about last week at council about disruption versus duration, and talked about our famous road cones. Normally, as soon as someone sees a road cone, they see disruption. So we generally see these days that people come back to us when we've given them options to say, hey, do you want us to sort of half do it for longer or just go for it? I'd say 10 out of 10 times they'll come back to us and say, actually, I wish I had have just chosen to go for it because I was disrupted that whole time anyway. Obviously the stadium is on track, so that's our key date. We do not want to be in front of the stadium when they're ready to open and us still digging holes. So again, that brings pressure on our program, hence why we're delivering it all at once. And right now there is a real downturn in the construction market. The construction work just isn't there, so there is ample resource in the city to grab to get this stuff done. So stakeholders, we've got a whole stakeholder liaison team that are out there just knocking on doors and meeting people and trying to limit that impact to them as much as possible. So the feedback we're getting so far is that generally I guess it's a bit refreshing for us as we've finally come into a project that it's almost unanimous around that area that people want it done. They can see that benefit at the end. So they're certainly feeling the pain already, but they can see that benefit that's going to be there. Yeah, that's right. They're really feeling the impact of the reduced on-street parking. And I think what goes with that is we've seen a lot of those lots that have been used as the Wilson's parking are now starting to be developed as well. So in this area, there are just less parking options. So we're just trying to work pretty hard with them about just day to day, how can we open another park on the street that we may not be taking up some space. They are appreciative of the level of communication that's coming through. They may not like what the communication says, but they are appreciative of the detail that's coming. They are clearly concerned about the impact on their turnover as a business, which again, we're trying to do everything we can to alleviate that and encourage people to come through. And our real challenge at the moment is obviously the transport work's now been awarded to proceed, is how we now start communicating that, because up until now, we've only really been able to communicate, hey, we're here doing these pipes for the next 4 months. And now it's, oh, by the way, we're also doing the roads till October. So where to next? We've still got approximately another month of pipes to install, and then we sort of pull back and start connecting them all onto the existing system. We've got a large impact coming in the Litchfield-Manchester High intersection. So we need to get out into that intersection and plug all these pipes in. And obviously very close to the bus depot, central city car parks and so on. It's we're expecting an impact. Anyway. That's right. Yeah, and we will be tunnelling under the tram lines again in that intersection. We're finalising the program for the transport work as it stands now. And then we need to continue to circle around with the stadium and just align those programs to make sure we're not impacting each other. And then obviously communicating these plans with the stakeholders. Yeah, I guess it's always a good chance to say how maybe the community board could help us out in these situations. So as I say, the businesses are already doing it tough. So just working out how can we continue to support and encourage people to go to that area of town. We know it's not desirable at the moment. Encourage stakeholders to talk to us. So we know that you guys are out in the community and people are talking to you and always encouraging them to come to us and talk to us. We're not going to always be able to solve the issue, but often there's little things we can do to alleviate that frustration a bit. Obviously pass on any feedback. We always love to hear the positive stuff if there is any out there, because we're normally getting negative. And this is the one we're always passing out to the public, is that the worker on site, they're doing as they're told. They're not the designer, they're not the programmer, they're not the traffic management designer. They're out there doing it, and obviously the amount of abuse that they cop day to day for just doing as they're told. So we really try to continue to educate the public that's their role out there doing it. They're not the ones behind the scenes.
Can I just say one thing to that? Something that helps that hugely, and it hasn't seemed to be something that happens much anymore, is there was always a very clear sign saying who was doing the work, as in the company doing the work, the person to contact if you had any questions or comments. So if you could defer people from the worker on the road and very clearly highlight who the company is and who the person to contact is, I think you might be able to move some people away from that particular area. But I've seen less and less of that on roadworks nowadays.
Yeah, I guess we could look at some signage options
Don't
around.
shoot me,
Yeah, but if you've got any feedback, negative or positive, contact this person, and even just knowing who it is as well. Because if people ring the council and go, "There's a hell of a mess down there," and they go, "Oh, who's there?" and I go, "I don't know." But if we know who's actually working on it, you can say, "Oh, it's a Downer's job or it's an Isaac's job or whatever."
Hold on, I'll go. Victoria had a question first.
Oh, just really quickly, have you got the Catholic Diocese on your stakeholder list?
We do. Yeah.
And I was pleased to see that the work's happening this year before on Barbados Street, before there's going to be any development on that site. So that's really we understand your timeframes. Thanks for that.
Yeah, so my question's around Chewham Street east of Barbados. That looks like it's coloured in portion 3, but there's work going on there because it's closed off from about the Mediterranean,
Uh,
yeah, back.
So the pipes are being installed down by Bados Street, so they cross over each of those intersections. So as we cross over those intersections, that's when that impacts that side of the street, if that makes sense. So we've crossed over Children's Street last week and heading towards St. Asaph Street now.
Right, so is that open again?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, it's in a business down there the other day, may or may not have been cosmetical actually, and they thought it was going to be closed till Christmas, so there you go.
So no, and there will be closures coming on that intersection. So almost down to Mediterranean Food Company, there will be a restriction on going across Barbados or up Barbados and turning left. There'll be a restriction coming for that soon. And that's around the water connections and getting across those intersections.
Okay, so that's been closed and now it's open and it's going to be closed
yeah,
again.
yeah.
And it'd be the same with Litchfield then, I
Correct,
assume, or?
Yeah, that's correct.
So there are almost weekly at the moment updates to those local areas, informing them of the next change happening. So they are really well kept informed on, it looks like this week, but next week it's going to look like this, and this is how you're going to get to your place of work or your
So where do you get your vacuum bags?
bagless.
Oh, Dyson, right.
John.
Yes, your key line there, talk to us if we're engaging with people down in the area with locals. How do they do that?
So we've got a stakeholder team set up. They've got 0800 numbers, they've got emails. We've got little business cards that we can get to you guys if you want to drop them out. We're dropping them around everywhere. If they are in that area, they would have already heard from us and have those details as well.
Hopefully so, yeah. Okay.
We've saturated them a lot.
Yes.
Have you? They'll be able to tell me. All right.
Jake, did you
Oh, I was just going to say, nice to have the contractor in the room.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're at council as well. I wasn't here then, but thank you for that, and also thank you for the work Isaacs did in Little Village. It went off without a hitch, so much appreciated.
And I just wanted to say thank you for the webinar thing that you did as well. I watched that yesterday, and I couldn't tell how many people were online, but it seemed like it was well received and I think very informative. So that
We've certainly got more attending the online one than we did in person one. So it was
what sort of numbers was it?
I think it was 17 at the online one and 7 in the Cardboard Cathedral.
Right.
And that was basically on the spoke.
So we just did a meet the contractor, a bit of a how we're going to engage with them and the construction sequencing. Obviously that was before the transport works came along as well. So now it's about trying to advertise that the transport works are happening too.
Yeah.
Well done on that. Any more questions, please, guys?
No, but no, and also good for transport to think of bundling portion two, because it would have been just plain silly for the transport stuff. December.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you for the update. Nice to see you. Okay. And that is related, we just finished. Okay. Yeah. Te wātio ki o mama, te ngāko, te tinana, te wairua i te ara takata. Koe ara e ro whakaia ake ki runga, ki tina, koe. Thanks, Brun.
Thank you.